And it wasn't one or two. It was the entire village was coming out onto the street, and I'm running down the middle of it. They were closing in around me.
When Davin Higens got into counterintelligence, the Twin Towers still were standing, and the job mostly involved running assets and hotspots as a way of keeping tabs on potential threats. But when he found himself in Iraq in the early days of the War on Terror, running assets took on an urgency he couldn't have imagined before. Because in Iraq, there always was a ticking bomb somewhere.
I hear this loud explosion. I automatically knew what had happened. I knew it was a bomb.
What is true bravery? What makes a hero a hero? Tested by the worries of what's happening at home, thousands of miles away, and the reality of what you're facing here and now. When your life is in danger every second, and it's either kill or be killed.
An original podcast from Incongruity Media.
This is Anthony Russo, and this is War.
Davin Higens left college to join the Army in the late 1990s. He already was married, but the demands of work and school meant he didn't see his wife Rebecca that often, so he balked when an Army recruiter approached him at first. He didn't want to trade not seeing her much for not seeing her for a year at a time during deployments. But the recruiter assured him that the worst-case scenario would be a 6-month stint in the Balkans. So he signed up to be a counterintelligence agent, or CI, and upon finishing his training moved with his wife to Germany. At first, it was just like the recruiter said, and in September 2001, Higens found himself deployed on a mission in the Balkans.
When 9/11 happened, I was part of an ADVON for KFOR. We were at a dock because that's where we were actually going to bring equipment in and out of Kosovo. Phones started ringing, and we were like, what's going on? There's probably 15, 20 of us, and a bunch of phones started ringing about the same time, and they said there's been a terrorist attack. So my colleague and I, there was only 2 CI guys there at this time. We jump in our car and we run back to the hotel and we watch CNN. We watch the towers fall. We watch the second plane run into the tower. Well, we're 20 people. We don't have any guns. We don't have anything at all. We don't have any way of protecting ourselves. The Bulgarian military actually come over, take over the hotel and secure it for us. At that time, we get orders. There's a lot of U.S. contractors out there. They come down and say, hey, you guys need to go out and find all the Americans there and tell them where they can go to get, if they feel threatened to come to safety and where we're at. So we're in the middle of this town, wandering around, finding all the Americans, telling them where we're at in case they need some safety. It was kind of crazy to know that we were the people out there trying to gather everyone up. We were 24, 25-year-old kids. I remember driving back to the hotel and I was thinking, Hezbollah has got a reputation and history of taking over airplanes. This has got to be Hezbollah. And by the time we got back there, things have been kind of clarified and came out that it was Al-Qaeda. I'm, a white guy, and my colleague was Hispanic, so he kind of blended in with the Bulgarian people, but they knew I was American. So whenever I stepped into a hotel or things like that, all eyes turned to us.
Higens had a knack for developing local sources. He was good at working with translators and making connections and introductions as a way of creating a kind of information stream or an information infrastructure that he could put to good use. As Afghanistan was about to kick off, Higens was helping the Air Force coordinate logistics, putting them in touch with people who could get their bombers refueled as the War on Terror prepared to get underway. But by the end of 2003, he and his family were back in Fort Collins. They were going to start their new lives there when he got the call. After only 30 days back in the U.S., Higens was bound for Iraq and his duty station in Al-Qaim.
What stands out for me the most is the way I viewed people in Iraq. I went into Iraq with the mindset that if you're not helping me, you're hindering me. You're going in with pure authority. There wasn't any local police. There wasn't any local city government or anything like that. We were everything. And so I'd go into a raid, and if the guy didn't answer my question, I was like, Hook him up. We're taking him back to my detention center and I'll have more time with him there. I didn't have to ask any permission. It was my option. And that kind of sort of power can become intoxicating. You have complete control of this guy. He doesn't do anything without your okay. If you do not check yourself, then you can get out of control. If you want to get intelligence, you have to give them the right motivation to talk to you. Torturing someone isn't getting intelligence. They will tell you whatever you want to hear to stop that pain. It doesn't increase our mission at all. You've got to go in there with a specific goal and go towards that information.
The process generally would go like this. Higens would accompany guys out on patrols, and when they cleared houses, he would interrogate the people they found, sort through any paperwork, and see if there was anything promising. His approach was simple. Given that the patrols were happening anyway, they may as well be pointed, so he often tried to provide command with an actionable lead to start the day, and from there, sometimes they would get more intel to use. His hope was as simple as his plan: catch bomb makers and discover weapons caches. But in the early days of the war, knowing whom to trust could be a real problem.
I'm always suspicious of someone that is kind of working with us. I always hung out with the interpreters. When we hired local nationals at the bazaars and stuff, I hung out there because I knew those were our insider threats. We hired a bunch of interpreters right off the street. We didn't have any. Those were the only ones we could find. We weren't prepared to go into Iraq. So anyone that spoke English and Arabic, we hired. I did the screening on them, and eventually I caught one for giving information to the insurgency, and then I caught another one, and I sent him to Abu Ghraib. After a while, I started naming them. I was like, you're going to be 3, 4, 5, and 6. And eventually, sooner or later, I think I ended up catching 6 out of the 8 that we hired right there. This one interpreter, he was screening people that were supposed to come directly to us. He was taking pictures of all of us. I'd been building this case for a long time. But because this interpreter was such a good friend of the command element, he was their interpreter, I had to really walk lightly on how I was going to approach this. If I make his life miserable, he's going to make my life miserable. So how do I tell him that his interpreter is handing information off to the bad people and we need to take him in for interrogation?
The best political solution was to highlight the threat in his reports and have that threat removed from above, commander to commander, before anything bad happened. So that's what he did. Navigating Iraq in those early days was a real problem. Because there was money to be had, it wasn't unusual for interpreters to play both sides against the middle, and there was little choice Americans had. Higens needed interpreters, and everyone was conducting the vetting process at breakneck speed. For him, the easiest thing to do was to watch them closely and to make it clear that the benefit of working with the Americans had a million more upsides than taking their money and then spying on them.
I was at the city hall and I was talking to this real douchebag. I mean, I hated him. And if I would have stuck around a little bit longer, I probably would have had him back in my holding facility. But he was like the city planner, and we were just sitting there talking, and he was saying, "Oh, there's no problems here. This is a good city. There's no insurgency." I took my body armor off and my helmet off and was just kind of relaxing there listening to his BS. This guy went on for about 5 minutes of how great this city is, and an RPG hit right behind us. It broke the glass and stuff's kind of spread all over us, and I lost it. I grabbed my helmet and I swung it, hit it middle of his desk. I broke whatever was on there. And then we walked out. At that point, PsyOps had an E7 that was an arranger, and so I just deferred everything to him. I go running out there with my team. He's like, "Hey, I need to take that corner. You take the specialist," and he had a saw, so we went over there and secured that corner of the compound. And I'm looking up and I see all these buildings that are over us, and I was like, man, if there's anything up there, we're dead. And they go chasing the people with the RPG.
And that was kind of the problem with being a counterintelligence officer after the invasion. Higens sometimes was attached to armed elements and sometimes he wasn't. When he wasn't, there always was a looming danger of being out there in small parties like the one during this attack. Striking that balance, though, between the big or small group was mission specific, sure, but also it was opportunity specific. And when you guessed wrong, you could be caught out all on your own with only an interpreter you hoped that you could trust. I want to talk to you about Care Of. Care Of is a monthly subscription vitamin service that delivers completely personalized vitamin and supplement packs right to your door. It works like this. Go to takecareof.com and take the online quiz. It only takes about 5 minutes to find out your personal, scientifically backed vitamin and supplement recommendations. They also recently have improved the quiz to get a sense of whether you're getting enough protein, fiber, and good fats to determine if you could benefit from Care Of's new natural protein powders. Care Of's delicious, nutrient-packed, quick stick powders can be added to your monthly delivery for an extra easy boost whenever you need it. Taking care of your health should be easy and convenient. It's a great opportunity to give yourself an extra boost this season, whether you're looking for more energy, better sleep, to maintain stress, or something else to help you feel your healthiest. Once they suggest supplements, they'll send you a 30-day supply in individual serving packets. Each day I have one with my name on it and an inspirational quote or a daily piece of trivia or challenge. Today's was, if a movie was made about your life, what would it be called? It's just something fun to think about while you're getting ready for the day. Of course, you can track your progress with the Care Of app that helps remind you to take your supplements. If you've been thinking of starting a new health plan or changing up your routine, you can get 50% off your first month of personalized Care Of vitamins. Go to takecareof.com and enter WAR50. That's takecareof.com and enter WAR50. Good habits are hard to build. Care Of can keep you mindful of your health. Go to takecareof.com and enter WAR50. In addition to coming along on raids and patrols, Higens would go out with the command element when they were visiting local officials. He would cut a deal with whichever commander was going out, saying that he would take care of whichever reports needed writing, and provided an extra interpreter in exchange for being allowed to tag along. The commanders mostly were checking in on government officials to see what operational or logistical support the U.S. could provide, but Higens already knew that the officials were way more interested in the support they could get than any information they could give.
The local police chief is going to give you the party line, but it's not him that I really want to talk to, because I don't want the party line. I want the truth. And so while they're in there talking with the local police, I'll kind of just step out and I talk to the secretary. He's the one that hears all the conversation. He's the one that knows everything, and that's the person I want to run. Went in there and talked to him, and I kind of said, hey, I'm looking for information on this. And he says, I work for you now. And I was like, that's right. His village, by the way, every time we went in there, we knew something bad was going to happen, that these guys hate us. And so he's like, hey, this house right here, this guy is a bad guy. Next time we came back, we ended up cordon searching the entire village.
Higens eventually caught a ride with an element that was heading out to the police secretary's home village and met some special forces guys on the way who were on a tangential mission. He got the heads up from them that they'd been looking into a house in that neighborhood as well. It wouldn't take him long to confirm everyone's suspicions, but by that time, there wouldn't be much he could do about it.
And it was just my translator and I at this time. So we ended up going talking to this house, and the security was right next to this house. So I tell the soldier there, say, I'm going in this house. If you guys pull out, just yell at me and I'll move with you. I go in there and I start talking to these guys, and they point out the same house. And I'm there for 15 minutes. I'm like, man, this has been kind of a long time. What's going on? So I look out the window and there's no security. The soldier's gone. Shit. I'm here by myself with my translator, and my translator is old and fat. And I get around the corner and they're gone. I can't see any of them, and I'm in this town that would probably rather shoot me than talk to me. They were just coming out of their houses and on the sidewalk. And it wasn't one or two. It was the entire village was coming out onto this street, and I'm running down the middle of it. They were closing in around me. And as time progressed, they were slowly getting closer and closer to me. And I was like, man, if they bum rush me, I'm done. There's no way I can stop them all. I'll get one or two of them, but then I'm captured. I don't know what I would do. And I've read enough stuff and seen enough videos that I knew I didn't want to be captured. I can't let them get too close, so I'm shouldering my weapon, waving around, making sure these guys get out of my way. They keep on getting closer. I see a Humvee, and it's probably about 2 300 meters away. And I was like, man, all right, let's do a 3-round burst, see if I can get their attention. And I was like, man, if I do a 3-round burst, they may think I'm engaging and turn around and unload on me. That's not a good idea. I don't want to be killed by fratricide either. So they pull off, and I was like, all right, second plan. I'm going to get up to the main road. I'm going to stop whatever vehicle I see, and I'm going to have him drive me to the police station. I'm going to grab my source, and if at this point, I'll burn him. It's my life or theirs. I'd get him and have him take me back to the fob. And then we get up to the main road and I see the convoy. It's all lined up. And so I'm running. I'm like, just because I see him doesn't mean they're not going to take off. I'm running to catch up with it. They finally see me. They don't take off. And I step into the Humvee and they take off. That was one of the scariest moments over there. I thought for sure I was going to be that guy.
Burning a source isn't something Higens took lightly, especially since it was tantamount to taking out a contract on a person, but sources often were in it at least as much for the money as for the cost, oftentimes a lot more. He was perfectly happy to have gotten a GPS reading on the house and sent it up the ladder for future raid consideration, but he was much more happy to have been spared the tough decision of revealing one of his sources. Sometimes, though, sources reveal themselves out of greed or stupidity or a bit of both, and there's just nothing for it but to step away and try not to get caught up in the blowback.
So there's a lot of different people out there that are trying to find information and run sources and things like this. And this one guy, I turned him over to a different agency, and he kept on coming back. He started going all over the place asking for money and this. And I was like, man, you're going to get yourself killed. He was seeing some other places, just being loud and wants money. I told him not to come see me ever again. It was probably about 2 weeks later. He ended up calling us and saying, hey, they're here. They're going to kill us. Come and protect us. So I go down to the talk and I was like, hey, can you run a patrol through here? And we didn't have a patrol anywhere in the area. From what I heard, they ended up throwing grenades through the house and stuff like that. And he was injured. You got to understand, I can't go out by myself. There's no way one Humvee is going to be let out of the fob. Once you start playing multiple fiddles, you end up making a lot of noise, and sooner or later you're going to get caught. And that's what happened to him. You do your best to protect him, but he was his own worst enemy. That's what we don't want in a source. We don't want someone that's loud and invincible and willing to do their own thing. And that's why I kind of cut ties with him.
Over the course of his tours as Army counterintelligence, Higens saw both the long game and the short game when it came to fighting the insurgency at an operational level. Of course, there's nothing better than killing or capturing insurgency Taliban or Al-Qaeda leaders, but continued harassment was a close second. Disruption was among the most effective weapons in his arsenal.
I've been chasing this guy for probably about 6 months. He was a bomb maker. I had a source that came out and said, I know where he's at. He's at this house. I went and talked to the commander and I said, hey, if we want this guy, we got to go now. We go hauling ass out there. We get to his house. Then they stack. They go in there and they start clearing the house. While they're clearing the house, I'm sitting out in the little courtyard. And they've got this big concrete wall around it. And there's a gate that we went in there that's open. So while they're clearing the house, that my interpreter's with them, looking for documents and getting people out of the house, there's little kids and females. I was like, man, we missed him. And then some guy stuck his head through the gate. I was like, what the hell? No one's going to stick their head through my gate. So I grabbed him and I slammed him up against the wall and I have him sitting there. And I only know a little bit of Arabic. While I'm doing this, another guy sticks his head through the gate. And by the time I was done, I had 4 of these people up against the wall and I have all their documents. My interpreter comes out. We ask a little bit more. It was one of those things. Do I keep them for just looking in the gate or not? So I take pictures of them. I'll go and talk to another source and see who they are and things like that. We missed our target. We were like, oh man, we missed our target. So we end up going back. I call up my source and I say, hey, he wasn't there. And my source met me and I showed him, I was like, hey, I just took pictures of these guys looking in the house. He's like, that third guy? That's Dawood Suleiman. I was like, son of a bitch, I had him in my hands. He's there now. So we raced down there again to get him. And we're talking about 15 minutes from the time we left. And by the time we got down there were only kids there. We missed him completely. I'll regret that. I'll never forget that guy's name, Dawood Suleiman. And I chased him the rest of my tour there, found out he was up in Mosul working at the factory up there as a taxi driver. So I passed that information up to the guys up there. I hope they got the guy.
Sometimes a loss is a loss, but sometimes it can be salvaged. Remember, counterintelligence relies as much on the long game as it does the immediate reaction to fresh intel. More than anything else, it's putting together scraps into a larger picture that allows you to act. Higens said his main concern always was to do whatever he was able to make U.S. forces a little bit safer, but that also required patience, the willingness to cultivate sources, absorb the little defeats, and learn from them, and then do your best going forward. Even when learning from your mistakes doesn't feel sufficient, you take your wins where you can get them. That way, you can keep the pressure on.
My source came out and said, hey, I can positively identify these people. So I go and talk to the lieutenant colonel. I was like, hey, we've got a plan. We've got to get out to this village, but if we go rolling out in tanks, we shake the earth. They'll know we're coming, from 20 miles away. We can't do this. I was like, we got some 82nd guys here. Let's fast rope them in, cut off this city so that we can get in there and get these guys. And they shot my idea down. They didn't want to do that. So we jumped in tanks and Bradleys and everything else that rumbles as we go along. And we're driving out there, and I look out there and they're burning tires. So I was like, son of a bitch, they know we're coming. We get out there. We cordon the little village and we move in. Our target's gone, but we end up there finding rockets, sniper rifles. We find the little yellow Bin Laden pamphlets. I mean, we didn't catch him, but we took out his entire armory. We had mines, we had all sorts of different IED materials.
From an operational perspective, Higens was on a two-part mission. The first was to run sources with an aim at undermining the insurgency leadership and discovering weapons caches and bomb-making facilities. The other part was trying to reduce the number of insurgents who could infiltrate the nascent Iraqi police force, and building a police force from the ground up in hostile territory already is a very difficult task. Logistical issues aside, it was kind of like hiring interpreters at the beginning of the war. Experience told them it was easier to ferret out turncoats afterwards than it was to prevent them from getting in the first place. But the insurgency didn't want to just undermine the rule of law. It wanted to prevent localities from even having police departments, which was a problem beyond the counterintelligence's scope.
We were in Talifar, and we were over at the police station, and we were doing our screening. We were there for the week, so we were in our second day or so. There's a big gaggle of them out there waiting to come in to be screened, and we don't let them sit by our front gate. They were out, 40, 50 yards from our front gate, and I hear this loud explosion. I automatically knew what had happened. I knew it was a bomb.
Within seconds, Higens threw on his body armor and grabbed up his A2 and, finding his interpreter still not dressed, headed out to the gate, prepared to deal with whatever attack was coming. But when he got there, it was way worse than he had worried. With the 2005 Iraqi elections looming, it already had been a really violent week in the region. This was the second suicide bombing in as many days and would be the beginning of an escalation of violence in Iraq that would continue to feature attacks on police and police recruits. As he made his way out into the courtyard, Higgins' primary concern was to make sure the rest of the compound was secure.
I'm looking around, and there were no guards at the gate. We take fighting position right there and man the gate, and then the medics run out and a couple other people run out there to help with the wounded. Quite frankly, at that point, I was more concerned about a secondary attack coming through the gate and killing everyone inside. We were probably there for a minute, 2 minutes at the most, until more people arrived, and then we ran out there. It's weird what your mind remembers. When we were running out there, it's not like in the movies where you'd have people just screaming and crying and things like that. That's not how it was. They were moaning. You just see these little movements of moaning and stuff. It was weird. I remember thinking, why am I not getting any traction? Why am I slipping all over the place? I know I'm in sand, but why am I slipping? And I looked down, and I'm stepping on flesh. I'm slipping on human body parts as I'm trying to get out to it. That's one of the things that you just try to forget.
Higgins kept moving toward the epicenter of the carnage. The chaos continued swirling around him, though with evacuations it was starting to back down a bit. His job wasn't security, though, nor was it medical evacuation. His job was to see what he could find out about the explosion, and see whether it could be traced back to any of the bomb makers he was already hunting.
So we get out there, and the medics have these people on stretchers already taken in. His body parts are just all over the place, and this one guy starts walking towards me, and we're amped and everything like that, so I shoulder my A2, and I'm yelling at him to stop. Of course, it's in English, so he doesn't understand, so I start using my Arabic, and I tell him to stop and to get down and stuff like that. It was probably, within a second or two that I was going to start unloading on this guy, and he stops, he gets down. And by that time, my interpreter gets out there, and I start asking him what's going on, and he tells me that his family was in that group, his brothers, his father, and his uncles, and he pointed to them all, and they're all dead. He's like, the only reason I am alive is because I was tired and I sat down. We ended up finding the face of the guy that was a suicide bomber. It's weird because his head popped off and his jaw was gone, but his face was still there. The top of his skull was all there, and we were able to take pictures of him and send it forward of who the suicide bomber was.
The bomb killed 30 applicants and injured another 40. Mostly men just standing in the sun hoping for the opportunity to become cops in an increasingly lawless area. The face gave them something to go on, but too often in the intelligence game it can be a futile chase. When a big part of your job is trying to prevent these things from happening, to try and follow these threads of information to a place that keeps suicide vests off the backs of people learning to use them, it can be especially frustrating. Higgins seriously had considered making the army his career. He loved doing counterintelligence, but the Abu Ghraib scandal broke about halfway through his first deployment, and that kind of changed things. One of the toughest parts of it for him, right from the beginning, was knowing that people he sent there because he suspected they had vital information never really got a good chance to give up the intel. What can you do?
I'm not even quite sure how to describe this. You work so hard to get the intel, and because you want to give the line units the best intelligence possible, but they work against you almost. It wasn't like the Army was working for the Army. If they weren't there helping me out, they were just hindering us. Abu Ghraib was a horrible thing. I will never say that Abu Ghraib was great. It didn't enhance anything for us. It hindered us. It made people hate us even more. If they would have done it correctly, they'd be looking for intelligence and not being sadistic bastards. After a while, they came down on interrogations quite hard. It hit every one of us that did any kind of tactical questions or interrogations. We're like, well, what can we do now? For us to do a proper interrogation, sometimes that takes time. But we don't have that time. We have 14 days with them, or sometimes even less, but it may take 14 days to actually build a rapport with a guy. And then you just have so many of them. If you use 14 days on one, that means you're not talking to 50 others. So when we send it to the next level, that's where they have more time. And then Abu Ghraib, if someone goes to Abu Ghraib and they're doing this and not actually looking for intelligence, you almost throw your hands up in the air and say, what can you do?
The response from inside the Army was ham-handed and missed the point. They were looking to get their house in order, sure, but just as with the plan to invade but not secure translators in advance, the way they approached it was scattershot and with predictable results.
After Abu Ghraib, basically what happened is that anyone that had any kind of connections with interrogations or detention operations, CID came and talked to you. They treated you like a common criminal, and that was another thing that just kind of spurred me to get out of the military, is you want me to do a job, but then you treat me like a common criminal for doing it. You asked me to do the job. You set my parameters. I followed your guidelines. I do what you ask of me, and then you treat me like this. I love my country. I still wanted to serve my country. And so I ended up going down to Fort Huachuca. I was an instructor down there at the schoolhouse, hopefully trying to give the next generation of CI and HUMIT collectors enough information that they can come out and be successful in the field. I ended up getting a job in law enforcement, and so I'm serving my country in a different capacity.
Dealing with sources, turncoats, and crooked politicians can take a real bite out of your humanity. Not just your ability to trust, but your ability to believe that there's even such a thing as altruism. That nobody does anything unless there's a reward or a punishment attached. But Higens carries with him one of the great kindnesses a soldier can receive. A reminder that, for the people at home, what he does really means something.
We walked off the plane, and they just had a line of people cheering us on, and I'll tell you, stepping on U.S. soil is the best feeling in the world. That was back when cell phones weren't as prevalent, and when you did have a cell phone, you paid by the minute. This one guy picked me out of everyone, said, "Hey, here's my cell phone. Call your family." And I'm like, "Are you sure? I mean, I don't want to use up your minutes or anything." It's like, "Call your family." And I was able to call my wife, tell her I'm home. And hearing her voice, being in my country, it was quite special. And then I found the guy who was like, "Hey, here's your phone back. I didn't want to use your minutes." He's like, "Take all the time you want." And I was like, "Are you sure?" He's like, "Do it." So I called my mom and told her I was safe and I was home. And that guy, I don't know his name. I couldn't pick him out of him from Adam, but he's my hero.
Everyone joins and serves for their own reasons, but what they have in common is the knowledge that there are those of us who respect the ideal. The sacrifice that begins with putting up your hand and swearing to protect your country. Because we all know how many different endings that beginning can have, and we know that they know, and that they do it anyway. Next time on This Is War.
We're running out there, we feel the machine gun rounds skipping through, like the side of our legs, like over our heads, like it's nuts.
Are you a combat veteran, or do you know one with a story to tell? Reach out to us at stories@thisiswar.com with your dates and branch of service and a brief description of the experience that you'd like to share. This Is War was written by me, Anthony Russo, and produced by Incongruity Media. If you like the show, you can help support us by visiting our sponsors or by leaving a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. You can also follow us on social media at This Is War. You also can find show notes, photos, and more background on each episode at thisiswar.com.